Hi friends, today I'm going to talk about a sci-fi drama from 2022 called Spiderhead. This is Z Movie Recaps. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Spiderhead is an ultra-modern prison that looks more like a hotel. Inmates live in a more lenient regime, are allowed to walk, socialize with each other, and have the opportunity to write off their sentences and get bonuses, but they don't get it all for nothing. In Spiderhead, there are drug trials, and not all of them are harmless. To be fair, all the trials are voluntary, and each prisoner has the right to refuse and return to a standard cell in another prison. Ray is one of the prisoners sitting on a chair in front of a mirror window, and Steve announces the beginning of the test by giving a drug into the guy's blood. After a minute, the subject is given the first dose of the drug and starts reading out simple jokes that make Ray laugh hysterically. When the jokes are replaced by scary facts, the guy's reaction remains the same. Another morning in Spiderhead is no different from the previous ones. The prisoners are woken up by a loudspeaker, and the name of the one who will take part in the trials today is announced. Steve asks Jeff if he is ready to test the new compound N40, which has never been administered to anyone before, and the guy easily agrees to participate in the experiment. In addition to the test drug, he is injected with another one, which makes the speech parts of the brain work, and Jeff manages to describe his condition in detail, mentioning the smallest details. After returning to the Spiderhead, Jeff meets Lizzie and tells her about his walk today. Unfortunately, the guy can't tell about everything he saw, because after the drug that improves the vocabulary, Jeff can't collect and somewhat singularly describe his condition. Jeff cannot gather even a few words. The only thing that the guy remembered everything that surrounded him at the time of the experiment, whether it was flowers or pipes of the factory, caused in him the strongest rush of love and admiration. In the evening, sitting in bed before going to bed, Jeff remembers how he ended up in prison, resting with a friend at a party. The guys decided to go for a drive, and drunk Jeff sat behind the wheel. The next day, the test N40, or as it is now called, Cupid, continue, but this time Jeff is not alone. In a pair to him invited Hyder, a cheeky girl who after the first seconds of the introduction changes her mind about her partner. The conversation between the couple lasts for a few seconds, after which they cannot stand it and several times do everything on the fact that they are being watched and even filmed. They do not care, as the substance completely disconnects the mind. The process ends with the fact that the young people confess to each other in love, which causes Steve delight, and he instructs his partner Marco to closely monitor the test subjects to know how they will behave when the effect of the drug. Jeff spends his free time with Lizzie as before, not telling her about what was on the test and trying to avoid meeting Hyder. The next day he is injected with the same Cupid, but in double dose, and instead of Hyder in the room there is a woman of age, which sober Jeff looks at with disgust. But as soon as the substance enters the bloodstream, the guy does all sorts of things to her. After this test, Jeff asks Marco to remove him from the kitchen, where they work together with Lizzie, as the guys are uncomfortable to continue communicating with his girlfriend. Steve brings Jeff to the lab, only this time to his place behind the glass, and shows the guy that in the room for experiments are sitting both of his partners from the last test. The head offers the guy to choose which of the girls he is ready to administer the drug that causes the strongest attacks of fear and pain, but Jeff cannot choose. Both friends he does not care, but he cannot wish them bad. In the end, the girls are just let go, having canceled the experiment, having received the right to another Friday walk. Jeff calls his girlfriend, who was with him on the night of the accident, but once again comes across only an answering machine. When he finds himself in the usual chair in the lab, Jeff sees Rogan, a huge prisoner covered with tattoos. The guy remembers everything that happened to him in the previous days with the girls and does not agree to the test, as he does not want anything to be done to him. But nothing happens, and the men are simply released after a few minutes of silence. Jeff realizes what happened, that he and Rogan were partners of one of the prisoners, and she had to choose which of them would be injected with Dermanix. When Jeff bursts into Steve's office, he confirms his guesses by seeing Hyder, and the doctor doesn't even argue with the prisoner, but instead shows him the scheme of who and with whom to have intimacy under the influence of the drug. Steve reminds him that being in Spiderhead is a privilege, and if he doesn't like it, he can transfer to a regular prison, but with no hope of being released anytime soon. Having taken the hint, the next time Jeff sits in the same room with Rogan without tantrums, Steve sends Marco for a weekend, advising his friend to have a good time on the mainland. The leader himself puts a Cupid to experience the rapture, which before he could only see in his charges. The tests continue, and Steve warns Jeff that it will be necessary to use Dermanics on the girls because a certain committee demands the purity of the experiment. The guy tries to explain that he does not want anyone to experience the effects of this substance, regardless of his attitude towards the girls. But the supervisor is adamant and again reminds Jeff of all the privileges he has by cooperating with them. Not wanting to return to a regular prison, Jeff agrees to inject Hyder with Dermanics. Hyder begins to cry and panic, but the management calmly records the data while listening to Jeff's comments, which have no hint of romantic feelings. The goal of the experiment is achieved and Steve plans to complete it, but there is a leak and Hyder gets out of control. The girl gets a sharp object in her hands and relieves herself of the agony caused by the drug. While Steve and Marco are fussing over the girl, Jeff sees the keys lost by his boss and finds a notebook with notes about his upcoming experiments and a lottery ticket with the same numbers as the name of the drugs he is administering. Noticing that Stiff is no longer behind the glass, Jeff manages to close the safe and throw the keys back so that the doctor doesn't realize that his secret is out. Steve warns Marco that if anyone finds out what happened to Hyder and he has to answer, he will drag everyone involved in the experiment with him. Lizzie participates in the trials for the first time, and the first thing she is injected with is Dermanics. After the experience, the girl meets Jeff in a secluded place and shares her emotions with him. The girl confesses that she is not sure that Spiderhead is better than a regular prison with the strictest regime. Jeff, in turn, is also frank with his girlfriend and confesses to her that that night, when he got into an accident, not only his friend was in the car, but also his favorite girl, who did not survive the trip. That is why the guy endures the test of drugs on himself, hoping to redeem himself in this way. A frank conversation between the couple leads to the fact that they spend the night together. Steve quickly guesses about their close relationship and decides to use this connection for his own purposes. When Jeff comes to the next test, he learns that today he must either agree to be injected with Lizzie's Dermanics or leave Spiderhead. Jeff refuses, but the doctor gives him a chance to postpone the experiment until morning, and then they meet the rebellious guy already armed with Lizzie's file. It turns out that the crime for which the girl is imprisoned is so terrible for her that no Dermanics can make it worse. Steve enjoys watching the guy turn the induction scale to maximum, but it quickly becomes clear to him that the guy is going to experiment on him, not on his girlfriend. Marco, seeing that Steve is trapped together with the prisoners, decides to correct the situation and gives the remote control to Jeff. The prisoners get all the information they need from Steve and convince him to open the main exit so that he and Lizzie can leave the prison, but the manager manages to snatch the remote control and inject the girl with a maximum dose of Dermanics, causing wild suffering, after which he smashes the smartphone so that no one can cancel his command. The couple manages to free themselves from the effects of the drugs and run out of the lab, but at this time Steve transmits over the speakerphone that because of the fugitives, all the others will return to prison, where their comfortable life will come to an end. Jeff and Lizzie are being hunted. Dozens of old criminals, including a huge tatted Rogan, plan to kill the couple, who deprive them of all the bonuses of this institution. Steve himself tries to escape with the drugs as Spiderhead is about to approach the police boats, which Marco called. Steve manages to leave the base and take to the sky in a small airplane before the cops arrive, but as his path is broken, the drugs are mixed into his bloodstream in huge quantities. Another Cupid's outburst causes delight, and the man turns the plane around to a tiny rocky island, seeing it as a place of paradise. Marco on the last boat sees his former boss circling over the sea and then crashing on the rocks. Jeff and Lizzie steal a boat and manage to sail away before the police arrive. Happy, free young people regret that Steve has not invented a drug that would cause self-forgiveness. Friends, thanks for watching. Write in the comments what you think about this movie, and do not forget to support us with likes and subscribe.